a couple things. You mentioned earlier that, in fact, the port did get funding from the federal government as part of the CARES Act.
Yeah.
I hadn't read that before, $72 million. So that's great. So does that mean you have not had to lay people off?
Yeah, we haven't had to lay people off. We got $72 million from the feds. We got a couple 100,000 for both Troutdale and Hillsborough as well. We're doing our best to not lay people off at the port. We've got about 800 employees, and they have all agreed to take a furlough. Essentially, they're taking 1 day a month for the next 15 months. I'm taking 2 myself. But essentially, what we're trying to do is keep enough cash to survive this trough. And we spend about $250 million a year at the airport. So 75, if you just round numbers, 75 million probably buys me 4 months of operations. The port actions, we've done budget cuts, and I mentioned furloughs and taking away raises and that sort of thing. That gets us another couple months. So we're just trying to create enough runway to get through the crisis and come out the other side. Because we're going to have an airport to run. We're going to have a facility to run. And if I start losing people, it's going to be harder for me to restart. So we're going to do our best to avoid layoffs. Obviously, no promises. If it's a deep and dire flatline recession for a while, it's going to be hard. But the port employees have really stepped up. I'm really proud of them.
So, and you mentioned earlier you're down to about 5% of your typical daily passenger, whatever is the term you use for your passenger numbers. Do you have any expectation of when you're going to start to see some growth? Our airlines talk to you and say we're going to start adding flights on June 1st or?
No, yeah, quite the contrary. Right now, they're still in cutting mode. So they're just we got a bunch of planes parked out there now on the crosswind runway. They're about 17 or 18 Alaska Air planes. They're beautiful, sitting out there waiting for action. But no, we don't see the bottom yet. And really, that's going to be a healthcare question, not a commercial question. People feel confident getting on a plane. And my hope is that we start seeing that in the summer. We're down 95%, and that runs through, it ripples through rental cars and Uber and Lyft and parking and concessions inside the building. So it's pretty vast impact. And a lot of people's lives being affected for sure.
Curtis, after 9/11, this thing called TSA was born, and it just completely transformed the airport experience. A necessary evil, but obviously you've done it. I'm just wondering, do you contemplate that after COVID, there are going to be similar changes? Someone was telling me that they anticipate that you're not going to be able to get on a flight without having your temperature taken at the airport.
In the short term, I think that's right. And, no promises here. It's a policy question that's really not up to us. But I do think, you see it already in Hong Kong or in Taipei. If you fly into those airports, or in Singapore, they have stands that do the screening of temperatures, people walking through. So I suspect that's going to be part of the protocol. We're talking to other airports around what can you do as the landlord or as the operator. I think spacing is going to be more interesting here in this transition back. One hopes that we get ourselves to a place where we're high functioning and we've addressed the healthcare needs, and there won't be a requirement for masks in the building or temperature screening. But Emirates is really interesting in the Middle East. Emirates airline I believe they're doing it in Dubai. They're giving a blood test to every person who gets on their plane. So, we are not going that far, but it is pretty fascinating. I mean, that is pedal to the metal. We're going to work this out and get people on airplanes. Although I'm not sure I want to give blood to get on an airplane.
Oh my God. You had told me before we started recording that some airlines are responding to the belief that while the government may open up the economy, people are going to be somewhat reluctant, and they're doing things like pulling out the middle seats of aisles on planes to create some spacing.
Correct.
What airlines are doing that?
I have to get back to you on which airlines, but some of the majors. I want to say Delta has been talking about that. I don't know that they're doing. What they are doing is no booking of the center seats.
And can they do that and run a profitable airline?
Well, so they're struggling right now. They essentially have to get federal permission to stop flying certain routes. And so what they're trying to do is figure out how you keep planes in the air and not lose a boatload of cash. And right now it's just really hard. So they're looking at the transition back and what steps can they take today to make it safer, or at least have people feel more confident in getting on. And you mentioned 9/11. One of the things that instilled more confidence in people was that they had to go through all the screening. Now, taking off your shoes at TSA never made a whole lot of sense. But that really was a signal that said, no, everyone's getting screened so you can enter with more confidence. And, I think we're going to need some of those steps going forward to get people back on planes.
What else could you imagine?
Well, certainly facial coverings, spacing in line or in TSA line, maybe even in we call them hold rooms, but in the waiting area when you're getting on a plane. How many people can get on a plane at a time? How the plane is boarded. Several airlines, for example, have started boarding in the last row and moving forward so that you're not walking past other people as you get on.
There's one other thing, again, we mentioned this before I pressed record. We talked about the bailout for the airline industries, and you'd indicated that while you think they deserve help from the federal government, they're a crucial part of the American economy, you would have liked to have seen a little bit more strings attached to those loans?
Yeah, I think it's important that the airlines, that when you're spending taxpayer money and you're giving it to corporations to get an outcome, the outcome should be connected to what the taxpayers want. And in the case of the airlines, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, we want terms on repayment, or we want to make sure you're not giving big bonuses to your executives. That's not unreasonable. Or doing share buybacks. That money belongs to taxpayers. And, I think the constraints that were put on the money were reasonable. You can't go and lay off a bunch of your employees in the short term. Some of the money you're going to have to pay back. Some of it will come in the form of a grant. The airlines are a very important part of the economy. They really are this interstitial, this connective fiber that helps keep our economy together. So you need them running. But, I do think it's fair, and we should learn lessons from the 08, 09 bailout dollars that went to buck up industries that then went on to make a boatload of cash, and the taxpayers didn't get a benefit from that.
And you feel like Congress, maybe in its rush to move, may have moved a little bit too quickly and not attached enough strings?
Look, there's always a balance here. I think they probably could have done a little more. I'm especially interested in how you make aviation more sustainable over time from an environmental perspective. And some of the airlines are on board for that. Our partners at Alaska or Southwest are already moving into biofuels. Delta's working on carbon credits. But, this was a good opportunity to say, you want something from us? Well, the public wants something from you, and here's what it might look like.
Right.